Welcome to the September tips, and as you can see here, the animals' fleeces are growing rapidly now, getting ready for the winter. And I'm sorry to have to say it, but winter is nearly upon us, and September in the beekeeping world is all about getting them ready for that winter siege. So I'm going to give you a step-by-step guide to get your bees successfully through to spring and avoid that terrible moment when you open your hive in the new season and they've all passed away. So let's go and have a look then. Are your bees in good shape, ready for the winter? Well, we're looking at two things. We're looking at the strength of the colony, so it's got to be 6 frames or more to have a good chance, and also we need to find out whether or not it's queen right. In other words, there is a queen in there and she is laying okay. So I've taken the top off this national poly hive, and immediately I can see that it's definitely strong enough. It's over 11 frames and temperament is good, so that tells me that everything is pretty much okay as far as I can tell. So the last thing I need to decide is whether or not the queen is in there or not. No need to go searching for the queen or take out all of the frames. I'm just looking for signs of eggs and brood, and there we are. You can clearly see that everything is all right. If, God forbid, you can't find any eggs or brood, then the chances are very much that you have no queen in there. So the good news is that during September it's not too late usually to acquire another British queen. They are still available for sale, or if the hive is very small, you can just amalgamate it with another one of your colonies. Winter feeding, very important. When should you feed? Well, you should really complete the feeding by the start of October. Very good reason for this. If we do get a change in the weather and things start getting colder, the bees will cluster together, and if they do that, they will not be interested in feeding, and it would follow that they would run the risk of starvation through the winter. So that's when you need to feed. How much food do they need? Well, it's between 30 and 40 kilos of food required to get through a normal winter. So that's 30 to 40 kilos of large bags of granulated sugar. Bear in mind there might be some honey reserves in there already, but that's the total you've got to be aiming for. Alternatively, you can use this inverted bee syrup, which is already made up into a winter feed solution, and some would say it's a lot easier for the bees to digest. I do have a video on winter feeding which goes into more depth on that. Feeders. What should I feed them with? Well, I've got a variety here. This is the simple contact or bucket feeder. It's literally a bucket with perforations in the lid. Fill it up, upturn it, and the bees will come up and draw the food down. There are rapid feeders on the market, various shapes and sizes. This is a rectangular one, which is a 8 pint, 1 gallon, and this is a 4 pinter, round one. Same process, same principle. You've got the cup there where the bees come up through the cone and then feed and then draw it back down. And finally, there is this versatile one which you put either fondant or syrup in this side, and the bees will come up once again through the crown board hole over this ridged pyramid and sip it up and take it back down there. This is a 8 pint rectangular plastic Miller feeder. So to get your bees ready for feeding, you just need an empty super or brood box and place your feeds there and the lid back on. That's simple. I do have videos, like I said before, showing you in more depth. I would also like to mention before we move on that winter can be quite warm at times. So when that happens, obviously the bees are going to be more active and so they will need to be eating more. So it's good practice, I think, to put a small bit of fondant, either some candy made up, this is candy Pauline Gold, or there's others on the market, or some just fondant, peel the lid off there, stick it there. So if the bees are hungry, they do want to draw it down, it gives them something to do. And definitely this is really good practice from January onwards, because it encourages your bees to be more active, giving them an earlier start for the springtime, which is what you want for a longer season. Just like us, bees love it warm and dry in the winter, so all we've got to do is turn the central heating on. So let's try and help the bees as well. If you've got a wooden hive like this, then they're not as good as polystyrene as far as heat conservation, and that's a big part of beekeeping, actually, managing energy. So what can we do to help? Well, firstly, you could put something on the crown board, like maybe a couple of carpet squares like that. They're porous, so that will help, or a woolly jumper, or we're lucky enough to have Barney, our pet ram, and I've saved the fleece this year, and we're just going to use that. And also, fleeces from sheep are supposed to carry some kind of deterrent for bugs and parasites as well. Around the side, you could use a hive wrap. I've got a video on this actually. This one has got a reflective inside, bit like a thermos flask. It wraps around there like that, and the good thing about this one is that you can easily just pop the lid back on as well. So that's a little bit about insulation. Damp is a big killer. So some beekeepers, if you've got a large colony, you could put a super underneath it. That will give them a bit more space and stop the dampness from going directly onto the brood. That's a handy hint. And also, if you notice here, there's a large gap between the hive and the floor, and there is no overgrowth underneath, which could cause dampness to rise. So just bear that in mind and make sure your hive isn't in too much shade all of the time. Protection from predators. Well, every country's got their problems. With Canada and Eastern Europe, they've got bears. In Africa, they've got their elephants. We just have to worry about woodpeckers and mice, because wherever you go, I suppose in the winter, animals would love to get their hands on that food in there. So first of all, mice, you need a simple mouse guard. You place it over the gap there and pin it with either some frame pins or drawing pins. Alternative, there's another version here which is a mouse guard travel gate, which will reverse round and slide up and down. That's the travel gate. And then woodpeckers, I've personally experienced this. It's not pleasant. I've had a couple of hives completely wrecked, not only the colonies but the hives themselves. They will peck in the side there. So the way of avoiding this is to wrap it completely around with some chicken wire. That should do the job. Well, that concludes this season's beekeeping tips. I hope you found it useful. Just a little mention, during the July tips I mentioned about treatment. If you didn't get around to treating your bees, then this is the stuff that's still not too late. It's not temperature reliant, it's Apivar, so get that in quick. So finally, before I go, what did you do during the winter? Well, most beekeeping associations have got seminars and lectures and that sort of thing. There's books to read, but more importantly, there's planning for next year, I think. So make sure you get all your hives cleaned up, get some more made up, get some frames and foundation assembled. A mentor of mine when I started beekeeping told me, whatever you think you're going to need for the next season, then if you double it, you'll be about right. So get your hammer out and your nails and all the rest of it, and get well prepared. See you soon.